Hey everyone, this is GosuDad, and welcome back to that final night in Season 6 of the Blizzard Online Ladder. This is Game 7, CuePhoenix versus Mr. B, Terran versus Terran on Antigua Shipyard. Hey everyone, this is GosuDad, and welcome to Antigua Shipyard. That's right, a new map. It's not Shakira's Plateau or Entombed Valley. Myself playing CuePhoenix in the red, playing Terran in the lower right-hand spawning point, yeah, this lower right-hand spawning point. Upper right-hand spawning point is, we'll call him Mr. B. That name's, I've tried to pronounce it a couple times, it's kind of funny. So we'll just stick with Mr. B. Playing Terran in the upper right-hand corner in the blue. Terran versus Terran, so we're going to be looking for differences in these two players' play. And what we decide to do in that early game and then into the mid-game. So I've tried to cast this a couple of times. One time was in the morning and just a little too groggy for myself. We'll try to do that morning cast once again. And the second time, I got about 4 minutes into the game and missed something that I really wanted to talk about that I saw in the first cast. So here we are in try number 3. One of the joys of novice casting here in StarCraft 2. Mr. B going for his supply depot. Bringing that really close to his command center. I'm not sure if that's so he can kind of delay that initial scout, or whether he can just get that supply depot made as soon as possible to prevent himself from being supply blocked. And now going for that barracks at the front of his base in the typical wall-off position, and he does a very good job placing it. Look at that. That is flush in the position it needs to be for the 2 supply depots to come down if he really wants to do a wall-off. And you can see that he is ahead on worker supply even at this early stage in the game, even at the 2-minute mark. And I think, oh, that's because I made this refinery. And that slows down, I have an extra worker building something, and so that slows down the mineral production and is going to slow down the production of workers, because that mineral income will be slightly less. I now decided to use SCVs to build 2 different bases, and looks like I'm sending out that scouting SCV after the barracks, which he should be able to make it to Mr. B's base before, you can see that little click right there from my mouse, before the wall is closed. Part of that is because he did put the supply depot back here. But both players going for gas, so should be seeing tanks from both. I did have my refinery a little early here, and you saw that that hindered my SCV production, and I'm not really sure that that was beneficial as far as me being able to build a factory. Although I suppose if I had built the put a lot of workers on gas right away, I would have had enough to build a factory as soon as the barracks was done, which since I didn't do that, it just seems like kind of an odd timing. I'm not sure that's really worth it. My SCV over here hiding from this marine, dodging into the steam vents to prevent detection, and circling around the base to see what I can see. I see a wall, and if we select the SCV, we can see what I can see. And not very much there. We got a nice little mineral line. At this point, I'm not getting harassed by that marine. Not sure he saw me escape there, but I'm going to draw attention to myself by attacking these SCVs, so that is not necessarily a good thing. I might have been able to hide my SCV inside the mineral line for a little while, but that is that. Now Mr. B going for an early expand, starting that expansion at 4 minutes. Now I say early, but of course, you know, it is early in the sense of the Silver Bronze League, you know, that's which is kind of what we're looking at here. Early as in I did not start one in my base because I was still building my factory. Now a big advantage that he's going to have there is he will be able to mine from 2 mineral lines before I do, if he takes advantage of that and puts SCVs on it. A lot of players can kind of miss that point and they'll be mining with 1 SCV for a really long time. And Mr. B kept putting down a couple of marines up at the front just to kind of guard things as I come into the base. He does have this back wall that he can always rely on to prevent me from coming into the main to look at his tech choices. But at this point, I mean, I usually tend to think that Terran players are going to go for tank Viking in a TvT setup, and so I set myself up for the long game, expecting players to kind of go for that a little bit more macro style. Tanks are kind of fun. They're a little, in some ways they're kind of easy to use because they're static defenses. You don't have to micro tanks around very much. But on the other hand, they do require a lot of micro because tanks, their value increases greatly when you move them around and siege and unsiege them. So my marine's going to be coming up this entrance ramp, see a bunker with nothing in it, and they're just going to walk by all these marines and get destroyed. I'm not even sure. Was that worth starting a cast over for that? But that's fine. So Mr. B at this point very far ahead in the worker supply. You can see he's almost at 30 and I'm almost at 20, even though our army supply is the same. And with this bunker, in an even fight, if I had all of my Marines with his Marines here, with these 6 Marines, these guys would win, of course, because they have that bunker. So at this point he's sitting very safe. He can tech up. You can see that he's finished his factory and will start building tanks shortly, or researching siege, as you can see there. Now on my side, I did, see, look at that, I finally built a tank. I had this refinery going for quite a while. I'm almost surprised that I only have, I'm keeping the gas count low, but I think some of that is I did build these add-ons and I did go straight for the starport. Now if I don't take advantage of this starport and put on some pressure with it, then I think that's just, I think I've made a lot of sacrifices at this point and it's not gaining me a lot. We check out the army supply tab and we're about the same supply tab, and he's much higher on workers, and he's going to maintain that lead because he has those 2 command centers and he's starting to build out of the second one. And if you look at that, you can see that he's queued up SCVs, which means that he could be even farther ahead than he is now if he was more efficient with that mineral usage. And he will be ahead on the gas income with the 4 refineries instead of 2. Don't see another factory yet. 3 barracks with just 1 add-on. I don't see any stim, no tech labs on barracks, so he is sacrificing that, and on my side I have not researched any of that, so that's a waste of a tech lab. So kind of looking at these 2 different setups and saying, there's a lot of inefficiencies here in both of our builds, but this is, I think, played around somewhere between midnight and 12:30 in the morning. So I think there's a lot of slow reaction times going here, but you can see how much he's almost 20 supply ahead of me. You can see the disadvantage of only just now expanding, and I think maybe I thought, well, I'll be safe, right? I'll move out with these 2 tanks. But on Antigua Shipyard, you want to get started really soon, because there's a couple of bad tank scenarios you don't want to get into. One, you don't want to get your opponent tanking up, sieging up at this natural expansion. You also don't want your opponent sieging up outside your main base right here. Both of those are really bad situations to be in, and siege tanks up here just to the outside of your main base, they're outside of your natural, they're outside of your your main defensive force, and they can hit right inside your main. And so that's where, although it's tempting for players to set up their defense here, if they're thinking ahead and know they're going to move to this 3rd expansion, having your defensive group staged right here is actually better. That protects all 3 of your expansions. Now on my side, I'm sitting back here, sitting back on the defensive, and in the case where I saw that Mr. B was ahead of me, because I did see this early expansion, when I see that Mr. B is ahead of me in the economy game at that point, that was really early, I think, maybe the 5-minute mark or something like that. I should have made a decision there. Am I going to push him with a lot of army units and try to kill him and take advantage of the fact that he will, for a brief moment, be lower on army units than I am? Or am I going to try to catch up in the economy game? And if I'm going to be trying to catch up, I should, possibly be double expanding or something like that, but definitely build my expansion down here in this natural area. And some of the reason for that is that if I come up to his base and I see that he has an early natural expansion, it's highly unlikely that he's going to push out with his army units and attack. So at that point, it's very safe for me to expand a couple of times or something like that. A little bit of coughing there. Disadvantage of casting in the early morning. Now Mr. B is sending in a drop, which he has the luxury of doing because he has more army units than I do, and I'm not sure that he knows that I'm ahead. He didn't do very much scouting in my base, although he did see that expansion was building inside my base instead of at my natural, so I think he knew that he had a little bit more time to do some different things. He had a little bit more time to build up units, maybe put on some aggression, because clearly I am also not putting pressure on him. Because when he sees that I'm building an expansion, he sees, oh, he's not doing a 1-base all-in, I'm going to have time to, he's going to try to catch up in the economy game, I'm ahead. At this point, if I just kind of maintain that lead, I'm going to win the game. So now these Marines coming in with no attack, no defensive units for myself. 12 minutes into the game, I should have had some missile turrets on the back of this base, or at least a couple Vikings or something. But these Marines are basically going to be able to do a ton of damage without any kind of response. Now they are going to escape, maybe. They're running away. I think they're just trying to stay in here and do damage, but they're going to run into these Marines up here. So I think I was expecting a drop coming from this direction. But, you know, I think it'd be fair to say that you could be expecting a drop coming from here too. And that's just terrible lack of missile turret placement. Now, if you were looking at the mini-map while this was going on, you can see that Mr. B is expanding to that third. And you can see that, as I was saying, this entrance ramp down here, main entrance ramp to your natural and your main, down here is a very good place to set up your defense. A combined defense for all three, of course looking out for these destructible rocks being put down. Now myself, for whatever reason, I'm deciding to do a ninja expansion off to the right hand side, and although this may seem like, oh, this is a really good idea to do that, if you get away with it, if your opponent doesn't scout it, it is a really good idea, but it's very hard to defend because all of your defensive units will be extremely far away. Now Mr. B apparently has played on this map before and thought about the map from a, you know, kind of an analytical standpoint, not just, oh, I'm just playing on a 4-player map. So he knows to come in and check out this third base, because this would be a natural place to expand to third, and he's going to set up that nice little siege line over here, sending in a sample marine just to see where things are, and you can see that Mr. B is smart enough to move him away, and he survives. But not, okay, not long enough to realize the tanks have probably not moved in the couple of seconds that you went away and came back. So you can see, wow, 5 tanks over here, and they should be able to exert pressure at the top of this ramp. And you can see this farthest tank, how far he can reach. He can reach all the way into half into this this entrance ramp, so he'll have some protection to come up this ramp if he wanted to, but he doesn't need to do that. Just those tank shots put pressure on myself at my natural expansion and kind of prevent me from expanding. They say don't come out, don't expand. Now I move these units in, huge mistake. I move them in before the tanks are set up, so even, you know, if I'm trying to use those units to gain vision onto the high ground, the tanks can't even make use of that. I also sent in ground units when I knew that there were tanks over here, and that's just silly, right? I should be setting in the Viking, in and out, trying to get vision onto these tanks. But if you saw from those range indicators, my tanks were outside the range of his tanks. And when you're trying to encroach on a tank line, you want to put your tanks just inside range so that if you can win that visibility battle, you'll be able to hit his tanks. And of course 2 tanks to 5 is no competition there. Now Mr. B being very aggressive, putting a command center at my third expansion, which actually prevents me from expanding there. So that's a very aggressive move on his part, but again, he's doing it at this point, he's in a contained situation. Now he doesn't have visibility all the way into my base, and he could probably safely move these tanks a little bit further out and use these Vikings to gain vision, but he's just playing conservative at this point, trying to maintain his lead that he established earlier on in the game simply by expanding early, and myself not putting pressure on him. That just is basically going to let him win the game. So if you see your opponent expanding before yourself, you have to make a choice on how you're going to try to get ahead of him. Either you're going to try to get ahead excuse me, ahead in army supply, or you're going to try to leapfrog him in the economy route, and I didn't do that. Now his units coming in very close, very risky with no air support here. They're going to be able to be attacked from the high ground, and I didn't focus on the tanks, which is what I should have been focusing on, especially since I had vision. And now with a simple scan, these tanks are now shooting into my main, and as I described earlier, that is exactly the situation you don't want to be on in Antigua Shipyard. You want to keep your opponent outside of your base. You want to be putting these tank lines out up here or further on in the middle of the map instead of right here. So at this point, I'm in a very much losing situation. If you look at that supply tab, I'm very behind almost half the workers of Mr. B. And army supply were okay, but he has a lot of tanks, and the tanks are set up. And not only that, but the tanks are set up in an aggressive forward position. So at this point, his tanks don't need to move. They are set up, they are just fine. He does need to be careful to keep vision on this high ground to make sure I don't move out, because these tanks, 3 tanks I'll put together, will be able to prevent me from approaching with ground units from this side. So all that leaves me with is Banshees or something like that, and you can see I'm building Vikings at this point because I'm trying to make sure that I keep that vision on the high ground down, but I am too late, and just with a few Marines, just with 1 medevac, he's going to be able to come up and kill both of these tech structures, especially these add-ons, because even though the starport and the barracks can move, the add-ons can't. Now these Vikings are going to be able to take out some medevacs, which is good. If you can win the air war in a tank versus tank battle, you will do very well. But in this case, he's got so much supply because he's been on the 3 different bases, and even now on a 4th base if you really wanted to. A little bit of a miss rally here by Mr. B. And if you look over here at this army on his essentially kind of a defensive third, he's got a bunch of Vikings all ready to go, and he has this Raven. Now, I wondered at first when I first saw this, why would you bring a Raven with you? And the answer is that the Raven can put down a point defense drone, which can soak up the attacks from Vikings. So you can win that Viking war with a Raven if you have that. Now, at this point, he's won the war for sure because he has much higher production structures than I do. Checking out his base, he's got a starport pumping out Vikings and a starport that could be adding more Ravens. So even though he's been only on one factory this entire time, he's at a huge advantage. And there you go. You can see that point defense drone shielding this medevac from being hit. And you can see it was shooting there, and you can see it again shooting, reducing the shots from the Vikings and reducing the shots from the Marauders. The Marauder shots can also be countered by this point defense drone, which is still there. And as you saw, he was able to take out those structures very easily. And for some reason, this SCV was set to auto repair, so he's repairing a reactor, which is no good. And that is GG. So yet again, another Terran versus Terran game here in the Silver Bronze League, just demonstrating some Terran basics. So we've got, you know, the tank line, we've got the air control with the Vikings, and you saw that Raven. That was kind of different. I don't think until I saw the replay did I realize that he had a Raven there and how, you know, pretty cool that was. I mean, I think with his Vikings alone, he would have been able to be just fine with just the Vikings by themselves. But with the Raven, he was able to really shut that down. Even if we were on even terms with Vikings, the Raven adds that tipping point that he would be able to succeed there. And you saw that the Raven was also good for preventing Marauders from attacking your tanks. And you can see from the early part of that game, you know, we talked about the early expand, and if you don't take, you know, you're kind of placed in a I have to leapfrog my opponent economy-wise, or I need to put pressure on with army units. I did neither of those, and that just basically guaranteed that I was going to lose. I could have probably scouted at the, I don't know, like the 10-minute mark or something like that, and realized that I was far enough behind that I wasn't going to catch up, and GG at that point. And that's kind of one of the differences, like I mentioned in other casts before, between, you know, playing at this lower level and playing at an upper level, is knowing when to quit. And especially in this case, I'm playing at the end of the ladder season. I'm trying to get in a lot of games. Knowing when to quit early is good. You know, there's no point in hanging around too long after the game is for surely done. All right, end of that cast. GosuDad signing off. Check out the blog at GosuDad.blogspot.com, and check out the Twitter at GosuDad. See you guys later.